Hi, Writing 350. Let's talk about Chapter 10, which is persuasive messaging. So, in our last two videos, we're looking at positive and negative messaging, and this is the last of the set, which is persuasive messaging. So, we have a slightly different goal here. In our positive messaging, of course, we're trying to give good news or information. Negative messaging was to deliver bad news, maintain goodwill. Here we're trying to persuade our audience to accept something, right? Or to get them to do an action. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. And as always, we're also trying to maintain goodwill. So one of the things we want to consider is, you may remember from your kind of earlier English days or writing classes, I'm talking about Aristotle's argument appeals, ethos, pathos, and logos. Anyone ringing a bell? So what these are kind of ways to convince an audience of something, right? Different ways that we can appeal to them. So if you may recall, logos is logic, right? Using logical appeals to connect to an audience. So thinking about using stats, figures, facts, things like that help convince them. Ethos, which is ethics or credibility, right? Whose authority can we appeal to help them believe the message, right? So a lot of times we see like celebrity endorsers or doctors, or if you're writing a research paper for a course, you might bring in an expert's opinion, right? Or in a court case or things like that. Who has credibility to help convince your audience? And then finally, pathos, which is the emotional appeal. So how can we connect to someone's emotions and help them to feel something that will get them to change their mind or change their beliefs? So we're still using those methods in persuasive business writing, right? All the time. And one big place we see this, of course, is in advertising. So not every one of you is going to go into advertising, but all of you see it all the time, right? And they rely on the different things, logical reasons, credibility, and emotions. But it also happens in other types of business messaging as well. So we're going to kind of talk through that for this section. So these are kind of the things that you want to consider before beginning, and we're going to go through each one of them. So starting with what you want people to do, right? You want to set out with a clear purpose in mind. We know we want to convince them, but what do we want them to actually do to take action, right? So before you begin, you really want to get clear with what action you want them to do. What do you want them to do now, right? Because we know that having someone take one step makes them a lot more likely to take further steps. But getting that first one can be very challenging. Next, we want to consider from their point of view what objections they're going to have. Typically in a business situation, we're going to see the two classics, right? And in life in general, excuse me, time and money, right? We don't have time to do this. We don't have money to do this. It's not available to us. So how can we combat against those objections? Some of them might be emotional or values objections. There could be any number of things, right? A reason why someone doesn't want to do something. So if we consider this first, we kind of have a leg up in that we're already kind of trying to, work against the argument that they're going to have. We want to think about how strong our case is and which way we want to build it. Do we want to build it on credibility? Do we want to build it on logic? Do we want to build it on emotions? Are we going to kind of have all three? What are the weak points in our own case? Where are we going to sort of see, okay, maybe this is not as strong? We want to think about what kind of persuasion is best for our organization and culture. So looking at, our national culture here, obviously we're in the United States, what kind of ways persuasion works there, but also in our own organization, right? What are the ways that people try to convince others to take action within that, or the way that they try to connect to their customers? Do they always rely simply on the facts? Do they like to go from a more emotion based, what kind of product or what kind of service or what kind of organization do you work for? Threats is a section that your book lays out as a way of persuasion. This typically happens more in an internal context. We don't spend a lot of time threatening outside audiences, but we've experienced this possibly in our jobs. If your boss tells you, if you don't, put your phone away, I'm going to fire you, or I'm going to write you up, or things like that, as a way of trying to convince you to stop doing it. In general, threats typically don't produce permanent change, and they won't really get the action that you want. So that's not usually an effective persuasive strategy. So you want to choose one that fits your situation. So your book outlines 3 different ones: a direct request pattern, problem solving, and sales. In the case of your assignment this week, you'll likely use that problem solving pattern. That's kind of what we're working with. So there's a little hint for you. A persuasive direct request is really a simple one, right? Somebody wants to ask you something and you want to ask somebody something and they'll probably do so without resistance, right? Oh, send me an email back when you get this, or something that's easy. They might not even read all of it. They just know you're asking them to do something that, yeah, fine, I'll do that without any, resistance. So this is kind of the structure of how you would want to do that direct request. A problem-solving message is when we need to convince the person, right? Because there's going to be a known problem, right? So this is kind of the different ways to go about that. So we want to start by developing a common ground, right? What things or what main thing do you and your audience sort of have in common? And we want to come from their point of view. Then we want to explain the situation and highlight the benefits that they see, right? How's this going to be beneficial to them? Figure out what they're going to object to, try to find a win-win, right? So if you know they're going to object on a basis of time and a basis of money, okay, how can we combat that? Yes, it will take time, but yes, it will cost money, but, right? How can we kind of, quell those fears? Give them a reason to act promptly. So one major force of persuasion is urgency, right? We see this all the time in advertising, right? Only one day left. Tickets are low. It's going to sell out. That's what prompts people to take action. So you want to make sure that you're showing that the time limit is real, and showing the cost of delaying action to get them to take that first step towards action. And then we want to think about how we can, or if we need to build emotional appeal, right? And depending on what the request is. So is there going to be a relevant story? Is there something we can do to focus on the audience? Some type of description that will help them to feel something specific. Lastly, the third pattern that is outlined here is sales and fundraising messages. So this might be if we're trying to get them to order something, to send a donation, things of that nature. So the organization is slightly different there. You might include something a little bit more emotional. So if you're seeing ones for products, they're kind of telling you a story about it, giving you facts about it, quotes, testimonials, things like that. And then kind of tells the story, right? And uses pictures as words. These tend to be a little bit more evocative in sales and fundraising messages. And then, again, giving them a specific close to tell them what to do, and give them a reason to act promptly, just like you would in that problem-solving message. So in your scenario for this section, you're going to work on a letter, an internal letter to Linda P. Jansen. She's the director of marketing. And again, you really want to focus on getting those specific reasons, starting with the common ground, explaining the benefits from her point of view. We know she's going to have objections. What are they? How can we fight against them? So I've given you kind of an organizing figure from your book that you can use, but you will have to come up with those details. So you have to make up kind of whatever you want that's reasonable for the scenario. So, feel free to come up with whatever details you wish to make this a little bit more straightforward for her. So this is what I'm going to be looking at as far as my checklist for grading. And that's all the things that I sort of want to see from this letter. So that's your kind of last piece for that. If you want more details about that letter, you can go to the week 2 deliverable video and it'll kind of break that down for you as well. So that is persuasive messaging. Good luck, and I hope you enjoyed it.